Hello and welcome to this Applied Ergonomics Lecture 2. We were continuing on work systems, and some of the basic things we discussed in the last lecture was that what is really the definition of a work system, some of the modalities which are involved in such systems, including work type or work measurement or even work management. We talked about components of a work system and what are the basic stakeholders involved in defining such a system. We also discussed about how many categories of people are going to be there in a work system, and then also what is the need for productivity improvement and definition of productivity, which was mapped as really the output upon the input. Okay. And as we already discussed in great details, that as there is a burgeoning need imposed by growing population on work systems, it is important that we keep on improving the efficacy or productivity so that you can give more benefits to the people at a lower cost. And that's again the whole purpose of organizing this and putting a systemic approach in studying such processes or such systems. So let's look at some more fundamental definitions associated with how you gauge productivity. When we talk about productivity on a very broad basis, it's really about the output per unit the input, but the output could be in terms of what of these different components which are associated with the system. And one of the very important components is the people component. So the output of any system with respect to what is the sort of input people component in a system could define a very important term, which is otherwise known as the labor productivity. In fact, a lot of work management which is involved in studying such systems is detailed about how to improve the task planning through technology, or how to improve the task layout through let us say simplifying processes and reducing waste or muda as we commonly know from processes, so that the whole idea is that with minimum number of people we can do most of the work. Okay. And so therefore on a parametric basis, it is important to monitor what is this term labor productivity, which is really the sort of ratio between the work units which are going into producing a product or a service or some other form of value added component which would which would contribute to the society, and that divided by the labor hours which are needed for producing such work units. Okay. So the way that the productivity really can be improved is to either increase the work unit per unit the labor hour which is there in the system, or reduce the labor hour in one work unit of the system, and both ways you could sort of get a improvement in the total overall labor productivity. And there is where really the requirement of ergonomics comes into picture, because if you look at a work and say that it is not being done in a proper manner, and you give some other way of doing that work which is spending lesser time or spending less effort and still be able to do this work in terms of an aid which could be a technology improvement or something, you basically trying to attack the labor productivity and saying that how do you increase it. Okay. So in that terms, if I wanted to consider what really is responsible for improvement in the labor productivity, the labor itself will not be able to contribute really much to improve the productivity, because there is only a finite amount of compression that a person can have in terms of the density of work or task that he is performing. Okay. So beyond that you can't take that aspect any further, because after a while the efficacy of the work delivered, if I keep on compressing to an individual and by tasking him more and more, that efficacy will come down, and that would be at the behest of the quality or the compliance of what is being planned, and that is not a good idea. So therefore it is always important that we do consider factors which are away from the labor in order to improve that productivity because of labor. So then the question becomes that what do you really do if you can't improve the labor productivity beyond a fixed value. And so some of the important more important factors which you need to address is, first example is that can I substitute some of the human effort through machine effort. Okay. So basically if I substituted machines for human labor. Also, of course, there is a socialistic aspect here, that there would be more unemployment and sort of that do a need of increasing job generation, but you have to look at it from a standpoint of the overall profitability or productivity of a system when you do such decisions of investments. And if supposing otherwise the available money is lying somewhere and not being utilized, it is a better idea to get a utility out of a system without really worrying about the society in general. Obviously, the question of job creation in a society becomes a a sort of a post production aspect. Okay, and if I wanted to consider as a in an engineering domain more issues related to how to improvise by more mechanization, it is going to only improve my productivity from a let us say a profitability or value addition standpoint. And so, I am using this connotation here in this course, particularly being ergonomics course, and the social factors like need for employment regeneration, etc., can be separately treated out. So, obviously, so if I do not do, or if I am limited by improving productivity of labor, one of the things could be to substitute more and more human labor by machines, and the other of course is technology, which is a very important role to play. Obviously, when we talk about information as a component in such work systems, technology, as you know, has greatly influenced the information flow. And in fact, that is one of the major reasons why today's systems or today's work systems are much more productive than what it used to be before the information age had really set up. Today, in lean manufacturing systems, for example, just by a click of a punch or a button, you could get an information to all the way up to the vendor end, where there is a sub-assembly or a part being produced, about how much more you need to produce per unit time. So, this is the kind of grading that has happened because of increased speed of information exchange and information technology. Okay. So, technology of course is a very, very important component, which makes a paradigm shift in the way that productivity can be improved, and basically it is a fundamental change in the way some of the activities or functions is accomplished, which brings in this higher productivity. And technology also could be in terms of, again, infrastructure. For example, today if I look at an automotive plant, everything related to the way that an automated assembly line goes, including the foolproofing, the various interlocks which are provided, would actually only increase the overall safety level, the quality of the let us say the quality of the work in general, or even the overall comfort of the concerned worker. And technology definitely changes quite a bit of points which are in favor and points which would actually make the place of work much better, okay, for the workforce, and that way also some improvement in productivity is realized. Okay. So, rather than compressing the labor factor alone, you have to work on technology and capital investments more, so that you could make a much better workplace, okay, in terms of efficient task implementation and carrying out things in a timely manner. So, if I wanted to sort of look at capital versus technology, so obviously they cannot be thought of as two discrete pockets, they happen almost with each other. New technology means new capital investment and vice versa, and so therefore, the distinctions between capital improvement and technology are often very, very subtle. So, almost always it is that new technologies would require higher capital investments. So, it is really important to recognize that important gains in productivity are more likely to be made by first of all introducing capital and more technology in the workplace, and then also by attempting to get more work in less time out of the workers, and these are sort of augmenting processes for point number 2 to happen. Also, you have to understand that with technology there is a marked change in the overall comfort level associated with carrying out a task or an operation. Let me give you an example. For example, let us say we talk about the coolant filling of an automotive in a workstation, which is done manually vis-a-vis a process where coolant filling is done automatically. And so, there are nowadays machines which are available, which you can engage along with the assembly line, and there is a movement of a coolant gun in a carriage which is overhead along with the vehicle up to the extent the coolant filling happens, and it is time balanced in a manner so that it is between limited zones and it is confined to one or maybe more than one workstations. But what is really happening here is that if there was a person who was opening the lid every time, checking the vacuuming on the system whether everything is vacuum proof, and then trying to fill the coolant along with moving with the vehicle as the assembly line goes on, it is definitely a very hard task, and it is also very unproductive. So, at times you are yourself witness to such change when such a machine which does auto vacuuming and auto filling at a pressure is installed, which actually the only purpose now left with the worker is to just engage and disengage the machine, and the machine carries out a task on a timed manner, in a manner so that it can do in every vehicle. Okay. And so, this actually is good, because now there is no scope of the concerned workforce or workman to somehow meet an accident, or let us say get along with the vehicle on the top of the assembly line, riding the vehicle from one station to another. And so, therefore, you are putting him in a safe zone, at the same time improving his quality of life. Okay. And you could actually enable him to carry out some more tasks, so that his productivity or his value addition to the system could improve, and he could remove some of the unsafe practices that he was earlier carrying while he was moving along with the vehicle to do this vacuuming and filling operation himself. So, this is what technology does really, you know. So, you have to understand that technology in a way is also important in terms of how to get more work done in less time in different systems, like I just said or give an example. So, having said that, it is important now to measure or start measuring productivity, and obviously it is not a very easy task, as one can recall, because again productivity is dependent on the number of output units. We always know that the output is really not very homogeneous. Okay. There is also multiple input factors which are involved in a work system. For example, labor, capital, technology, materials, these are all energy, these are all input factors, and their costs do vary in a competitive environment in a particular economic zone with certain forces. Okay. So, from time to time, place to place, there is obviously a marked difference in the way that input factors are costed, and therefore, and with this along with coupled with the fact that the product mix also changes based on the demand of the market. Today, the customer may want to have a certain line of product, tomorrow he may just make it obsolete and try for doing something else. Okay. Or some other market may prop up in some other part of the world which wants the old product. So, therefore, the product mix also keeps on changing, and therefore, because of this dynamism associated with the work system, it is very hard to measure productivity, but still there are certain gauges and matrices which are used to do that, and probably in the next lecture I will cover how to measure the productivity and move ahead with things like productivity index, etc., which do from a year to year make you know, the production system towards more efficiency. Thank you very much.